Your intelligence is not saving you. It is the reason you are stuck. Think about that for a second. You are not struggling because you are weak. You are not where you want to be because you lack information. You have read the books. You have watched the videos. You have had the conversations with yourself at 2 a.m, laying in the dark, making promises about who you are going to become. And yet, here you are. Same patterns, same doubts, same invisible ceiling you cannot seem to break through. That is not a coincidence, and I am going to tell you exactly why. Most people walk through life believing that their biggest enemy is outside of them. A difficult boss, a toxic relationship, bad timing, a world that does not recognize their value. But I am Harrison, and what I have come to understand, after years of studying the Stoics and the deepest corners of behavioral psychology, is that none of that is your real problem. Your real problem is far closer than that. It is living inside the very mind you trust to guide you every single day. Here is what nobody talks about. The mind does not fail you because it is weak. It fails you because it is extraordinarily good at one specific thing, keeping you exactly where you are. It builds arguments. It constructs justifications. It manufactures reasons why today is not the right day, why that person does not deserve your forgiveness, why your situation is different, why the rules that apply to everyone else simply do not apply to you. And it does all of this with the vocabulary of wisdom, dressed up to sound like self-awareness. That is the trap. And if you have never seen it clearly before, what I'm about to share with you will change the way you see yourself permanently. Not because it is motivational, but because it is true. Stay with me. What comes next is going to be uncomfortable. And that discomfort is exactly the point. Let me ask you something nobody ever asks. Why do you keep doing the things you know are hurting you? Not because you do not know better. You do. You have known for a long time. So why does the pattern keep repeating? Why does the same argument happen with the same person in almost the same words? Why do you reach for the same escape, the same distraction, the same emotional reaction, even when you swore to yourself you were done with it? The answer is not a lack of willpower. The answer is something far more confronting than that. At some point in your life, the behavior that is now destroying your peace actually saved you. That anxious overthinking that keeps you up at night. It once made you feel prepared in a world that felt unpredictable. That explosive reaction when someone pushes your buttons. It once made people back off when you had no other way to protect yourself. That emotional withdrawal, the shutting down, the going cold and quiet when things get hard. It once kept you from getting hurt in situations where vulnerability was dangerous. Your nervous system is not broken. It learned. It adapted. It built a survival strategy around the environment you were in, and it worked. The problem is that the environment changed, but the strategy never got the memo. This is what psychologists call a survival identity. It is the personality you constructed on top of coping mechanisms that once served a real purpose. And here is why this is so difficult to dismantle. Those mechanisms are not stored in your logic. They are stored in your body, in your automatic responses, in the half-second reaction that happens before your rational mind even wakes up. You cannot think your way out of a pattern that was never built by thinking in the first place. Epictetus understood this at a level that still feels radical today. In the Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 1, he draws an absolute line between what is within our power and what is not. And what strikes me every time I read that is not the philosophy itself. It is the implication underneath it. If your reactions feel automatic, if they feel like they are just who you are, you have confused a learned pattern with an identity. You have mistaken a coping mechanism for a personality, and that single confusion is costing you more than you realize. Here is what that looks like in real life. You are in a conversation and someone says something dismissive. Before you have even processed the words, your chest tightens, your jaw sets, something shifts in your posture, and then one of two things happens. Either you explode and later you tell yourself you have a temper, or you go completely silent and later you tell yourself you are just an introvert who does not like conflict. But neither of those is who you are. Both of them are old software running on a system that has outgrown the original threat. The survival identity is seductive because it feels authentic. It feels like you. Saying, "I am just an anxious person," or "I have always been like this," feels like self-knowledge. But there is a profound difference between knowing yourself and narrating your limitations as if they are fixed. One is honesty. The other is surrender dressed up as acceptance. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 4, Paragraph 3, that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. But here is the part people skip over. That way of thinking is not handed to you. It is not inherited. It is not fate. It is constructed, rebuilt, and chosen, one response at a time, in the moments when the old pattern is screaming at you to repeat itself. The first step is not changing the behavior. The first step is seeing it clearly enough to stop calling it your personality, because you cannot edit a chapter you believe is the whole book. And here is what I need you to sit with before we move forward. The version of you that keeps repeating these patterns is not your enemy. That version of you was trying to survive something real. The question is whether you are still in that situation, or whether you are just living inside a story that ended a long time ago. You do not want to heal. You want to be right. I need you to be honest with me right now. Not the version of honest where you nod along and privately make an exception for yourself. Actually honest. Because what I am about to say is the thing that separates the people who genuinely change from the people who spend years consuming content about change and stay exactly the same. You do not want to heal. You want to be understood. You want to be validated. You want the people who hurt you to finally see what they did. You want the situation that broke something in you to be officially recognized as unfair. And until that happens, some part of you has decided quietly, without ever announcing it, that you are not ready to move. That is not weakness. That is one of the most human things that exists, but it is also one of the most expensive. Here is the psychological mechanism behind it. When something painful happens to us, the mind does not just record the event. It builds a case around it. It collects evidence. It rehearses arguments. It constructs a version of the story where your pain is justified, where your reaction makes complete sense, where anyone reasonable would agree that you were wronged. And that case, that internal courtroom, where you are always both the victim and the prosecutor, gives you something that feels remarkably like purpose. Staying in the wound becomes a way of proving the wound was real. This is why so many people confuse rumination with processing. They believe that replaying the event, re-examining every detail, imagining what they should have said is somehow moving them forward. It is not. It is the mind keeping the injury alive because an acknowledged injury feels safer than the vulnerability of letting it go and not knowing who you are without it. Seneca wrote in his letters to Lucilius, Letter 5, that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But I want to take that further than most people do, because the imagination Seneca was describing is not just fear of the future. It is also the architecture of grievance we build around the past, the suffering we keep reconstructing, not because it is happening to us, but because we have made it part of how we explain ourselves to ourselves. Think about someone in your life who has been telling the same story of being wronged for years. The story has become polished. The details are always vivid. The villain is always clear, and every time they tell it, there is a particular energy, almost like relief because the story still holds up. The story still proves the point. But the point it is proving has nothing to do with healing. It has everything to do with being right. And if you are being truly honest, you have a version of that story too. Maybe it is about a parent who never showed up the way you needed. Maybe it is about a relationship that ended in a way that still does not make sense. Maybe it is about an opportunity that was taken from you, a betrayal you never saw coming, a version of your life that should have happened and did not. The details are yours, but the structure is universal. Here is the confronting part. Healing requires you to give up the case. Not because what happened to you was not real. It was. Not because your pain was not legitimate. It absolutely was. But because carrying the verdict into every new moment of your life means the person who hurt you is still making decisions about your present, long after they have left the room. Epictetus addressed this with the kind of directness that makes you want to look away. In the Discourses of Epictetus, Book 2, Chapter 1, he argues that it is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. And the judgment that someone else's actions permanently define your capacity for peace is one of the most damaging conclusions a person can carry quietly inside them. Wanting to be right is not the same as being free. And the moment you stop needing the world to officially confirm your pain before you decide to move forward, something shifts. Not because the past changes, it does not, but because you stop handing it the authority to write your future. The real question is not what happened to you. The real question is whether you are willing to be well even if no one ever admits what they did to you. That answer, whatever it is, tells you everything about where you actually are. The pain you cannot name is the pain that runs your life. There is something happening inside you right now that you have probably never put into words. Not because you lack the intelligence to describe it, but because nobody ever taught you that naming what you feel is not weakness. It is the most precise form of power available to you. Most people move through their entire lives operating on emotional blur. They know something feels wrong. They know there is a tightness in the chest during certain conversations, a heaviness that arrives on Sunday evenings, an irritability that comes out sideways at the people who had nothing to do with what is actually bothering them. They feel it, but they never get specific about it. And that lack of specificity is not a minor gap. It is the reason the same situations keep producing the same destruction. Here is what the science actually shows. When you experience an emotion and you give it a precise name, the activity in the amygdala, which is the part of your brain that generates the raw alarm response, measurably decreases. Researchers call this affect labeling. What it means in plain language is this: the act of naming what you feel interrupts the automatic escalation of that feeling, not suppresses it, not denies it, interrupts it, creates space between the stimulus and the response. And in that space, for the first time, you have a choice. But here is where most people fall short. They use emotional language that is so broad it is functionally useless. I am angry. I am stressed. I am fine, which almost always means the opposite. These words do not name an experience. They gesture at a category. And your nervous system, which is looking for precise instructions, gets nothing it can actually work with. There is a world of difference between saying, I am angry, and saying, I feel dismissed, and underneath that I am afraid that my perspective will never matter to the person I am trying to reach. The first statement gives you nowhere to go. The second one tells you exactly what is happening and exactly what it would take to address it. One is a label slapped on a fire. The other is a map. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with a discipline that most people never apply to their inner life. In Meditations, Book 8, Paragraph 7, he writes about the importance of examining impressions carefully before acting on them. What he was describing was not abstract philosophy. It was a daily practice of refusing to let the first interpretation of an event become the final one. He would slow down the moment. He would interrogate the feeling. He would ask what was actually true versus what his mind was projecting onto the situation. That practice, done consistently, is what allowed a man ruling the most powerful empire in the world to write some of the most emotionally precise observations in human history. Let me give you a real scene. Two people are having dinner. One of them goes quiet. The other one immediately feels something shift in the room, and without a single word being exchanged, an entire internal story begins constructing itself. They are upset with me. I must have done something wrong. They are pulling away. This is how it always starts before everything falls apart. And by the time the quiet person looks up and says they are just tired, the other person is already halfway through an emotional spiral that has nothing to do with what is actually happening at the table. That spiral did not start with the silence. It started with an unnamed fear that was already living inside the person, waiting for any available trigger to attach itself to. The silence was just the door it walked through. When you cannot name what you are actually afraid of, you will find evidence of it everywhere. When you cannot identify the specific wound underneath the reaction, every scratch will feel like surgery, and you will keep responding to the present moment with the full force of every unresolved experience you have never gotten specific about. Seneca writes in his letters to Lucilius, letter 94, that the mind must be called back from external things into itself. That act of calling the mind back is not meditation in the abstract sense. It is the daily, deliberate practice of asking yourself what you are actually feeling beneath the surface behavior. Not the performance of the feeling, the root of it. Start there. The next time you feel that familiar tightening, that pull toward a reaction you will probably regret, stop before you name it with the first word that comes. Go one level deeper. Ask what is underneath the anger. Ask what the anxiety is actually protecting. Ask what the withdrawal is trying to say that you do not yet have the courage to speak directly. Because the emotion you cannot name with precision will run your decisions with absolute authority. And the emotion you can name clearly, you can finally choose what to do with. That distinction between feeling governed and feeling informed by what you experience is where genuine freedom begins. And what I am going to show you next will make that freedom either grow or collapse, depending on which trap you are currently sitting inside without knowing it. You are not waiting for motivation. You are hiding behind it. Let me tell you about a feeling you know intimately. It is that moment when you are about to do the thing you know you need to do, the difficult conversation, the early morning, the boundary you have been postponing, the decision you have been circling for months, and something inside you says, not yet, not today. Wait until you feel ready. Wait until the timing is right. Wait until you feel that surge of clarity and energy and absolute certainty that this is the moment. And so you wait. And the surge never comes. Or it comes for 40 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon and then disappears before you act on it. And the cycle starts again. That feeling has a name that sounds reasonable. You call it waiting for motivation. But I want to offer you a different name for it, one that is far more accurate. You are not waiting for motivation. You are using the absence of motivation as permission to avoid the discomfort of action. And your mind, which is exceptionally skilled at protecting you from discomfort, has learned to dress that avoidance in the language of wisdom. It tells you that acting without full readiness is reckless, that patience is a virtue, that the right moment will present itself. And every single one of those statements can be true in the right context, which is exactly what makes them such effective hiding places. Here is the psychological reality. Motivation is an emotional state. It is generated by the brain as a response to perceived reward, novelty, or momentum. Like all emotional states, it is temporary, inconsistent, and completely unreliable as a foundation for sustained behavior. Waiting for motivation to act is the equivalent of waiting to feel hungry before you decide whether food is important to your survival. The feeling is real, but the feeling is not the point. Epictetus was unambiguous about this in the Discourses of Epictetus, Book 1, Chapter 4. He describes the student of philosophy not as someone who waits to feel enlightened before practicing, but as someone who practices precisely because they do not yet feel what they are trying to become. The practice precedes the state. The action creates the condition. You do not wait to feel disciplined and then act. You act. And discipline is what that acting, repeated over time, eventually becomes. This is the inversion that changes everything. And most people never make it because the culture around self-improvement has sold them a story that goes in the wrong direction. The story says, find your why, get inspired, feel the fire, then move. But the actual sequence for people who build lives they respect is almost always the reverse. They move first. The feeling follows. And when the feeling disappears, which it will, they move again anyway, because they have stopped treating the feeling as a prerequisite. Here's what this looks like in a real life. Two people decide they want to get physically stronger. The first one waits until they feel motivated. They have 2 or 3 extraordinary weeks where everything clicks, where they feel unstoppable, where the gym feels like the best decision they have ever made. And then one bad night of sleep happens. One stressful week at work. One moment where the couch feels more honest than the commitment. And without the emotional fuel, the behavior stops. Because the behavior was always dependent on the feeling. The second person does not wait to feel ready. They build a structure, a specific time, a specific location, a specific sequence that requires as few in-the-moment decisions as possible. And on the days when they feel nothing, when motivation is completely absent, they show up anyway, not because they are more disciplined by nature, but because they have designed their environment so that showing up is easier than not showing up. The feeling is irrelevant to the system. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea repeatedly throughout Meditations. In Book 5, Paragraph 1, he describes the internal argument of waking up in the cold and not wanting to rise. And what strikes me about that passage is not that he resolves the argument with inspiration. He resolves it with purpose. He reminds himself what he is for, not how he feels, but what he is for. That distinction carries an entire philosophy inside it. Wanting to change is not enough. Feeling ready to change is not enough. Understanding why change matters is not even enough, because understanding without structure is just a more sophisticated form of delay. What produces actual change is the decision to act within a system that does not require you to negotiate with your feelings every single morning. The moment you stop asking yourself whether you feel like doing the thing, and start building the conditions under which the thing simply gets done, you will have crossed a line that most people spend their entire lives approaching, but never stepping over. And what waits on the other side of that line is not what you expect. It is not the absence of resistance. The resistance stays. What changes is your relationship to it. You stop experiencing resistance as a signal to stop. You start experiencing it as confirmation that you are moving in a direction that actually matters. Because comfort, as I am going to show you next, is far more dangerous than most people are willing to admit. The most dangerous place you will ever live is inside your comfort zone. I want you to think about the most comfortable version of your current life, the routines that feel familiar, the relationships that require nothing new from you, the professional situation that is not great but is predictable, the emotional patterns that hurt, but hurt in ways you have learned to manage, the version of your days that does not ask too much, does not demand too much, does not expose too much. Now I want you to consider something that might be the most unsettling thing I say to you today. That comfort is not keeping you safe. It is keeping you small, and the worst part is that it has been doing it so quietly, so gradually, so convincingly dressed up as stability, that you may have never once questioned whether the life you are protecting is actually the life you want. Most people think of comfort zones in terms of obvious avoidances, the speech they never give, the business they never start, the conversation they keep postponing. But there is a far more insidious version of the comfort zone that nobody talks about, and it is not about what you are avoiding doing. It is about what you have become comfortable feeling. Psychologists describe this through the concept of emotional homeostasis. Your nervous system at its most fundamental level is not optimizing for happiness. It is optimizing for familiarity. It will work to return you to whatever emotional baseline it has come to recognize as normal, regardless of whether that baseline is healthy, regardless of whether it serves you, regardless of whether it is slowly erasing the person you were capable of becoming. Familiar pain is neurologically preferable to unfamiliar peace. Your own biology will sabotage your progress to keep you in a state it recognizes. This is why people leave genuinely destructive situations and unconsciously rebuild them. Not because they are foolish, not because they did not learn anything, but because the nervous system experienced the absence of chaos as a threat. Calm felt suspicious. Consistency felt boring. A relationship without conflict felt emotionally flat. And so, without ever consciously deciding to, they started pulling in the direction of what felt real, which was the version of intensity and uncertainty they had spent years learning to call love, or ambition, or just the way things are. Seneca addressed the seduction of false comfort in his letters to Lucilius, Letter 1, with an urgency that feels almost aggressive. He writes about the way time slips from us not in dramatic losses, but in small surrenders, in moments we give away without noticing, in days that pass without a single act of genuine intention. What he was describing is the comfort zone operating at its most invisible. Not the dramatic refusal to act, but the quiet drift into a life constructed entirely around avoiding the discomfort of becoming. Here is a scene that might feel familiar. Someone ends a relationship that was genuinely damaging. They do the work, they go to therapy, they build new routines, and then they meet someone patient, someone consistent, someone who does not create emergencies, someone who simply shows up with steadiness and care. And instead of experiencing relief, they experience unease. Something feels off. The relationship feels too easy. They start looking for problems. They test the person's boundaries. They create distance and then measure how the person responds. And eventually, they either end the relationship and explain it as incompatibility, or they create enough chaos within it to make it feel familiar again. That is not a failure of character. That is homeostasis. That is the nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do, protecting you from the unfamiliar, even when the unfamiliar is everything you said you wanted. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, Book 2, paragraph 14, about the brevity of everything. The emperor, the slave, the applause, the disgrace, all of it passing with equal speed. What he was pointing at underneath that observation is the cost of spending the limited time available to you inside an existence you have settled for because expansion felt too uncertain. The Stoics were not asking people to be reckless. They were asking people to be honest about the difference between genuine contentment and the numbing comfort of a life lived entirely within the boundaries of what feels safe. Real growth does not feel like inspiration. It does not arrive with music and clarity and a sense of rightness. Real growth feels like standing at the edge of something you cannot fully see, with your nervous system telling you in every possible way to go back to where you were and choosing to move forward anyway. Not because you are fearless, but because you have finally recognized that the fear of staying is greater than the fear of changing. The question is not whether your current comfort is real. It is. The question is what it is costing you to maintain it. Because every day spent inside the familiar version of yourself is a day the person you are capable of becoming waits without guarantee for you to finally decide they are worth the discomfort of arrival. And that decision, the one between the life you have managed and the life you are capable of, leads directly to the final thing I need to tell you. Because everything we have covered until now has been preparation for the most important shift of all. Stop betraying yourself and call it patience. This is the last thing I'm going to say to you, and I need you to hear it without the filter you usually use to make difficult truths more comfortable. Because everything we have covered in this conversation, the survival identity, the need to be right, the unnamed pain, the motivation trap, the seduction of familiar comfort, all of it leads to a single point that most people spend their entire lives dancing around without ever landing on it directly. You already know what you need to do. Not in the vague, abstract sense of knowing you should be better, or do more, or try harder. I mean, specifically, precisely. You know the relationship that has crossed a line so many times that the line no longer exists. You know the habit that is quietly dismantling your health, your focus, your self-respect. You know the conversation you have been rehearsing for months and never initiating. You know the version of your life that is held together by tolerance of things that should have been addressed a long time ago. You know all of it. The clarity is not missing. What is missing is the willingness to pay the price that acting on that clarity demands. And so the mind does something extraordinarily sophisticated. It reframes the avoidance. It calls the delay wisdom. It calls the tolerance maturity. It calls the inaction patience. It builds an entire philosophical framework around staying exactly where you are, and it uses the language of growth to do it. You tell yourself you are waiting for the right moment. You tell yourself you are still processing. You tell yourself you do not want to act from emotion, that you want to be sure, that you owe it to the situation to think it through one more time. And all of that sounds reasonable. It sounds measured. It sounds like the kind of thing a thoughtful person would say. But Epictetus would not let you have that. In the Discourses of Epictetus, Book 3, Chapter 23, he challenges his students not on what they know, but on whether their conduct matches what they claim to understand. He was not interested in philosophical sophistication disconnected from lived behavior. He considered that kind of knowledge worse than ignorance, because at least ignorance is honest about what it does not have. Knowing the right thing and refusing to do it is not wisdom held in reserve. It is self-betrayal with a convincing vocabulary. Self-betrayal is the right word for it. And I want you to sit with that word, because most people have never applied it to themselves in this context. Betrayal is something we associate with other people. Someone who breaks a promise, someone who reveals a secret, someone who chooses their own interest at the cost of yours. But the most consistent and damaging form of betrayal in your life is the one you commit against yourself, every time you see clearly what is needed and choose the comfortable version of inaction instead. Here is what that betrayal costs you at a level that goes beyond the obvious. Every time your mind identifies something that needs to change and you negotiate your way out of acting on it, your internal sense of personal authority erodes slightly. You begin, at a level below conscious thought, to trust yourself less. Not because you are weak, but because you have accumulated evidence that your own conclusions do not necessarily lead anywhere. That the insight will come, the resolution will feel close, and then somehow, nothing will move. And over time, that pattern teaches you that your own clarity is not to be taken seriously, that your own boundaries are suggestions, that your own needs are negotiable. Marcus Aurelius returned to self-honesty with a consistency that reads almost like urgency in Meditations, Book 10, paragraph 16, where he examines the cost of self-deception in the most direct terms available to him. He was a man who had every external reason to rationalize inaction, every political complexity, every social pressure, every philosophical justification available to someone of his position. And still he came back, again and again, to the same demand he placed on himself. See clearly. Act accordingly. Do not dress cowardice in the language of caution. Seneca makes the same demand in a different register. In his letters to Lucilius, letter 77, he writes that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. And the waste he is describing is not laziness in the conventional sense. It is the specific waste of a person who understands what their life requires and spends that life finding reasons to defer the requirement. Here is what self-honesty actually looks like in practice. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is the quiet moment when you stop asking whether you are ready and start asking whether you are honest. It is the recognition that the story you have been telling yourself about why this is not the right time has been running for longer than any reasonable delay could justify. It is the acknowledgement that the person you are protecting, by staying comfortable, is not a future version of yourself. It is the current version, the one who has already decided that peace is too expensive and shrinking is safer. You are not that person. Or rather, you do not have to keep being that person. Because the version of you that knows what needs to happen, that feels the weight of the unlived decision, that wakes up with the quiet awareness that something important is being postponed, that version is not asking you for more information. It is not asking you for more time. It is asking you for one thing, and it has been asking for longer than you want to admit. It is asking you to stop betraying it. Not with a dramatic gesture, not with a declaration that everything changes today. With something far simpler and far harder than that. With one honest decision, made in one specific moment, that you do not negotiate away. The boundary you set and hold, the conversation you initiate and do not abandon halfway through, the habit you break on the day when breaking it is least convenient. The version of yourself you choose when the comfortable version is right there, available, familiar, and asking nothing of you. That is where freedom actually lives. Not in the absence of difficulty, not in the arrival of perfect conditions. In the moment you decide that who you are becoming matters more than the temporary comfort of who you have been. The mind that learns to honor its own clarity becomes a place of genuine peace. And that peace, the kind that is built on self-respect rather than self-avoidance, is the only kind that no circumstance, no person, and no version of the past can take from you.